Well, you know what? That's kind of a good start. Let me actually just introduce you first, properly introduce you. And this is some stuff that I pulled on from online. So, filmmaker, runner, and raconteur, David Antoniuk is an award-winning writer and director with a long storied career in film and television. He's directed episodes for Canadian TV series Ron James Show, The Next Step, web series The Whole Truth. David's short film, Strange and Eerie Memoirs of Billy Wuthergloom, won the Award of Excellence at the Canadian International Film Festival and the Best Shorts Film Competition in Los Angeles. You also produced a film called The Blind Owl, which is based on a Persian novel, which I want to ask you kind of, did you have anything to do with the rights, buying the rights, purchasing the rights to that, or was that stuff already done?
In the public domain.
Public domain, okay.
Also, it's an Iranian writer who, not to sound blasé, but they can try and sue us. Like if there was some distant family member, the thing is, he's considered a pariah in Iran, right? Even though the novel is so dark, there's a story that the novel is so dark, parents would not let their children read it for fear that they would commit suicide.
Trippy.
Yeah.
So, and then explain to me, I'm having trouble saying this, elephthromania?
Elephthromania, yeah. So that was the one to call that. So elephthromania is the zest, quest, striving for freedom at any cost. It's a Greek word.
And did you have anybody, this was your own movie, so you probably didn't have anybody be like, we got to change the title to like Greek Jews in Auschwitz or something.
The producer, Greg Pappas, started the project years ago. So he's a Greek American, and Olympia Dukakis was attached to it from way back. And then there was the local producer, Joanna Tanis, contacted my business partner and I, my business partner, Chuck Scott, and Greg, who started the project, that the title really meant a lot to him. And it's funny because when the film is played at a lot of festivals, like at least a dozen at this point, and it's won some awards. And when it plays at the Greek festivals, they have no problem with the title, right? It's a Greek word, right? Elephthromania, right?
Now you have a couple quotes from your projects here, and I just kind of found it funny. Someone said, "Wow, I didn't know people still made movies like this." And then another one that you wrote is, "I didn't expect that. Can I have a glass of water? I need to lie down."
I can't even remember which project that was.
This episode you're watching of the Backyard Variety Tour is presented by Jandals from Broken Stick Brew Co. Get a little New Zealand-inspired Pilsner in your life. Jandals from Broken Stick Brew Co. Order online now. Shipping all over Ontario. And you got the Jets jersey. It's a perfect background for this kind of show.
Well, you know,
and then the Jets jersey too.
I'm not a huge sporto, but I am from the prairies. The Jets occupy a certain, space in my memory. Going to see. Just hold on one sec. Hey, I'm on a podcast. Leave me alone. That was my landline. It so rarely rings. I'm like, what? I live out in the country, right? And you're like, well, who has a landline anymore? I do. The power went out for almost 24 hours. It backs onto a conservation area. We have a swimming pool. The thing about the COVID and the isolation, I actually have done pretty good. I'm kind of a lone wolf to begin with. So, I mean, I do miss being able to go out occasionally for a drink with someone, but we have nature. So we've done okay to be isolated for so long, but in terms of the like I've got a forest I'm going to go for a walk in after this, so life is good.
Yeah, you mentioned that you're a lone wolf. I'm a little bit of a lone wolf too. Do you think that might be, I'm sure it's artists in general, but do you think it's directors and screenwriters and filmmakers? Because oftentimes you have to be alone for that stuff.
That's a good question. Yes, I mean, when I think of, I've worked with all kinds of directors, and yeah, a lot of them definitely want to be kind of alone with their thoughts and not bothered. But then as a director, you still also have to learn to be a good communicator. It's one thing to formulate these ideas in your mind's eye, but you also need to be able to say, well, this is what I want. right, in as few words as possible, right? So you have great directors, but that aren't necessarily able to communicate, right? So the lone wolf at some point has to direct the pack, right? Like when you're a director, right? And then there's the other part of it. So we're lone wolves. The other part of making movies is promotion, and I find self promotion is just not the way I'm wired. I find it very, very difficult. I was going over notes and stuff, like things to talk about, and funny stories and whatever. It's like, yeah, but okay, that's not really about me. That's about someone else. It's funny, but I've got to kind of rewire things, to talk about myself.
I'm terrible at that stuff as well. I'm
Yeah.
just slugging my way through it. But also I'm not trying that hard too, because I kind of always just want the work to speak for itself. And whether it does, it does. Whether it doesn't, I'm happy making.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
already happy.
yeah, you've got to be okay with that. Like I don't. It's funny because I don't do it for adulation. I know this is gonna sound really arrogant. I already know if it's good or not. You can do something like and to have other people tell you it's good. The recognition. It's like, oh, I really enjoyed that, but I know if it's good or not already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I know my projects, I put them out there and I'm sitting there and I'm like, whatever, but what am I going to do? Just like not put them out there after putting all this time and money? Like, I know they're not perfect. I know they're
I know,
like,
yeah.
But you just got to go through the process. And
but that's where the promotion angle comes in. There's a lot of things out there that, well, that's not that good, but the way that they promoted it, right? Hollywood runs on it, right? Like,
that's true. I know people who are having, some good strides of success and are less talented and more self-promotion, really.
yeah. More power to them. And that's why, Canada, I think there's a lot of unseen gems, right? And telefilm, if you go and apply for money, they want, what's your marketing plan? It's like, well, okay, I'm making a movie here. That's the hard part. That being said, I actually find the making of it the easy part. That's my 30 years of production experience. You want a car crash? Sure, no problem. You want a guy to fall out of a tree? Yeah, we can figure that out. You want this? Is the script any good? Well, that's the hard part. Did you cast it right? That's hard. But the actual production thing, that's easy, right? But the marketing, that's effing impossible, right? How to get it into festivals? How to, the poster, the trailer, how to get it out there, right? How to get seen, I've been in, I don't know, 50 festivals at this point with my various projects, right? And there was one that I did, it had an Academy Award winning actor in it, right? I did a film called The Left Romania about Greek Jews in Auschwitz. And it was a few years ago. It had Olympia Dukakis in it, right? And I thought, okay, well, this is going to open all kinds of doors. And no, actually, tell you the truth, I think there was a bit of Holocaust fatigue. In that moment, that zeitgeist, they're like, yeah, we're done with this for a while. Something had just won Best Picture, about 2 years before that. Like, things go in waves, right? Yeah.
So most of your experience, I went through your IMDb, and that's I picked out some things that I've got some questions about. Most of your experience is second assistant directing, first assistant directing, producing, screenwriting, and directing. So let's go to the beginning. So I did some research, and where did Staffordshire, it said you went to Ryerson University, but also Staffordshire, UK from 89 to 93.
I went, you got to go back farther than that, but I got my master's degree through like online learning through Rain Dance, like an organization in the UK, which had an office here. And so the bona fides were provided by Staffordshire in the UK. And so, yeah, I got my master's in film. And I enjoyed Ryerson. I enjoyed the academia a lot. I thought it was something that maybe I could have or should have continued in, because I enjoy the dialectic, right? The talking about things and image theory, image deconstruction. And Ryerson really changed the way I thought about the world. Many years later, I went to get my master's degree from Staffordshire in the UK. So it was all online. At the time I was working, I couldn't even go pick up the diploma. You know, I won the award of merit when I went there. It was about 18 months, you know, of online learning. Yeah.
So image deconstruction, I love that. It's almost like freeze framing, you know, your favorite movies in class or something like that, and breaking down blocking and, you know,
Yeah,
framing and all that stuff.
absolutely. Like the shot should say something that reflects back to the whole. I mean, it's one way of looking at it, but there was a teacher that I had. So when I'm from Winnipeg, growing up living in Winnipeg. I thought I was going to be a writer, you know, you know, who's going to make movies in Winnipeg? There was the Winnipeg Film Group, but they were kind of cliquey. I joined a group called Video Pool, you know, the Video Pool, they made like artsy kind of, you know, very oblique kind of stuff. And then I thought, well, I didn't really know how to get into the film industry, so okay, I'm just going to be an English teacher, high school English teacher, because it was something that I had an aptitude for. But then I said, no, I'm going to go to Ryerson. I'm going to go to film school. I applied to 4. Ryerson was the only one I was able to get the in-person interview. The guy who, I made a short film, the guy who watched it, you know, for my interview, he said, well, I don't really find this very compelling, and we've had a lot of better things. And so you know, he's basically saying that I'm not going to get in. So I gave him what for and said I was going to get into the movie business, and not him or anyone else was going to stop me. His name was Phil Burgesson. He later was one of my instructors at Ryerson. Like, I ended up getting in. So you would show, and he was photography. However, the things that he talked about in image deconstruction, they can be applied to films, right? What are you trying to say? Well, this doesn't say that. Or you say, well, I'm trying to say, and you go, so what? Well, but so what? Like, he would push you to try and say something. And then when you widen that out, it's like, okay, the shot says something that speaks to the whole, the scene says something that speaks to the whole, and it all should all feed into each other. They should all have significance to the larger thrust of what you're trying to say.
And you mentioned you like the dialect part, going to be an English teacher. That was somewhat of a fallback plan I had. I went to go be an English teacher at one point too, because I also like that. I've always been good at all that stuff and always just enjoyed writing.
Graduated Ryerson in 93, and I picked up went to the Toronto Film Office and picked up the photocopied list of all the films shooting in town, which at that time they would still give out, right? And I called every one of them offering to volunteer. Now, these are all union shows, etc. And they're like, no, we're not taking volunteers. But then there was one called Eclipse, directed by Jeremy Podeswa of Boardwalk Empire and Game of Thrones, right? So this was his first feature. And they needed a craft service person. So the craft service person had just quit. I had no idea what a craft service person did. I had a friend from film school who had done it on a CBC show, so he gave me some pointers. So I went and I did that. It was a 20-day shoot. I was there for the last 10. And
I'm not sure. That's interesting because I've actually got him written down somewhere to be a guest someday, you know, if I can keep this up and keep this going. Because I like the things that he has to say. Most of all, it's actually somewhat negative about the Canadian viewpoint of filmmaking and how we need to be riskier and on our own and just not copy the States and stuff like that. So I went to like a Q&A he had a couple of years ago, and I was like, I like this guy. I like his mentality. And it's no wonder why he's such a huge success on those big shows.
Yeah, you can tell one of his episodes. He has a certain approach. I'm like, oh, Jeremy directed this one. And I mean, there was an episode of Boardwalk Empire where it started with this crane shot coming down from the chandelier. I'm like, yeah, Jeremy did this one. And he's very good at interpreting the scripts of those shows that he does. Right?
And once you kind of do one thing for HBO and someone likes it, you know, you're just going to keep getting all those calls for all those shows.
Well, he's directed the best of everything, you know, that's part of the zeitgeist, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's get back to you. So Only You, 1994, post-production assistant.
I ended up I did craft service. Then I did a bit of locations. I was the office PA on Dance Me Outside, Bruce McDonald's film, and we shot up north. And I started as the office PA, and then I ended up on set. Norman Jewison was the executive producer of that. And I ended up working in his office in downtown Toronto. And I was there for about a year and a half. That was amazing because Norman is, extraordinary filmmaker, In the Heat of the Night, Moonstruck, A Soldier's Story, and Justice for All. There's so many of his films that are, Fiddler on the Roof, Jesus Christ Superstar, the list just goes on and on. And the stories were so amazing, right? So he was posting Only You when I started working for him. He was in post-production for that. And then we went into production on Bogus, Gerard Depardieu and Whoopi Goldberg. So if you look in the dictionary, under the word hedonist, you're going to see a picture of Gerard Depardieu vomiting on himself, right? Because he's he would fly to New York, take the Concorde back to Paris, have a drunken weekend, come back, for Monday, totally, hungover. He was, but then when it came time to work, when he stepped onto that set, okay, wow, I believe everything you're saying.
Yeah, man. When I was a kid, he was like a huge star. He was like the lead in every movie for a certain run of time that I was seeing for a couple of years or whatever.
So they're calling for him on set, and I was working on the trailers for a little bit. So that's where, you get the cast in and out of the process and bring them to set. Because I worked for Norman, Norman had been doing it for a long time and did not suffer fools gladly, right? And so he could be a little testy time. So they always send me to get Norman, and this time they send me to go get Gerard. And they're waiting for him on set, and he's not. And here's the thing: I go to get him, and he's standing there, cigarette in one hand, phone in the other, and he's urinating on Whoopi Goldberg's trailer, right? And Mr. Depardieu, they're ready for you on set. He just looks at me like, well, I'm just going to let this play out because what am I going to do? Zip him up, right? And then the second AD comes storming. And he's like, why aren't you getting him to set? And I go have a look. I got to get out of this business. Yeah, whatever. He actually did end up getting out of the business. He created a board game. And live it off that. So much of this process is simple. And okay, so Norman, I'm working for Norman. Okay, is this a route to go? You stay in these things, you work in these offices, and you work your way up, and then eventually, can you make it to producing, right? I mean, he had a development deal with Columbia TriStar, right? So those things don't exist in the same way anymore. But he had an office on the lot, right? And I remember this script came through. It was called Trouble on 182, and it was about a alcoholic doctor who ends up killing a patient, ends up doing some time. When he gets out, as part of his parole, he has to go become a school bus driver for some troubled kids. Because why wouldn't you give an ex-alcoholic a busload full of kids, right? And then what happens is the kids at one point take over the bus, and it becomes Die Hard meets the Little Rascals, right? And they're going to offer this to Tom Hanks. And I may have actually said, he reads English, right? And, or he speaks English. And then he won his first Oscar, right? But anyway, that was the kind of stuff at that time that they were trying to, Norman wasn't going to direct this, but this was the kind of project his company, Yorktown Productions at that time, was going to try and make. I was like, well, maybe this isn't the right place for me.
Let me ask you, you did some assistant location managing work. Just tell me about anything that you can remember from this thing called Jack Reed, Death and Vengeance, that stars Brian Dennehy. And this is him, I don't know, in the 90s or something. And he's got
late 90s. Yeah, I did. I worked as a second AD in the late 90s. And then I also worked as an ALM. And I also worked as a driver. I did, and I also worked in set deck. But I did 2 shows as an ALM back to back. And I love that part, scouting the locations. You knock on people's door. Hi, I'm a filmmaker, or I'm a ALM, blah, blah, blah. And people go, okay. And they let you into their homes, and you take some pictures. And so that was fascinating. Brian Dennehy, So he was directing and acting in it.
Yeah.
And he could be a little cranky. He was so good though with the people, like walking to set, there would be people standing there. He always went over, shook their hands, because he got it. Like he understood that these people, you know, there were the reasons why he had a career, right? So it was a series of books about a marshal in Chicago, U.S. Marshal in Chicago. And so that was the fifth one that he had done. And he was actually a good director, because he knew what it was he was doing. He knew when it was time to do more, and he knew when it was time to do less. He'd do a couple takes and moving on, right? Because it's a TV movie, you had an aggressive schedule. I remember we were shooting at the corner of Davenport and Queen, the old Y that's there, this fancy old, beautiful old building. And no, not those streets are, anyway. So we're shooting, we have a camera position on top of this church, right? And, you know, we're looking at the building. So there's me and the locations PA. It's like raining and, you know, there's lights everywhere. The tent is coming loose from the plywood. Ryan Dennehy is like holding court on his chair, you know, yelling, barking out orders, whatever. Me and the locations PA are like holding on to this tent so it doesn't blow away. He's like, he ends with this one. He's like, you know what? Because we're like midnight, there's lights everywhere. There's lights shining on the street. We're going to cause an accident. And he's like, you know, you Canadians are really nice. If we were really in Chicago, they would have opened fire by now. It's like,
You've done a little bit of everything. I kind of did a little bit of everything too. You know, I did some daily AD stuff, so I experienced what that was like. I did set deck, a little bit of art department stuff, did the location stuff. You did some transportation stuff on Ready or Not, which I know was a huge show when I was growing up.
yeah.
You know, came on after school or whatever. You know, I remember Busy, Amanda Zim and Busy Ramone.
Those were good kids. I think one of them, I don't know, one of them's not in the business anymore. The other one's still doing stuff. There was so the guy who was the transportation coordinator on Dance Me Outside was the transportation coordinator on that. So he called me and said, hey, do you want to, it was a non-union gig, and, you know, driving cast, it was great. There was another movie I did with them, and it was just like one of these low budget features. And it was like called The Teacher Ate My Homework. I don't even know if it's on my IMDb or not. And we shot a lot in Hamilton, and we were making really low money, and the hours were really long. And Evan, the transport coordinator, Lord love him, like we needed more guys. So I would recommending some people, and, you know, my guys, you know, he was hiring my guys, but then he would bring these other guys. He was interested in characters, right? Like there was this one guy who had this massive scar in his head because apparently he had taken like a hubcap to the head when he was a kid, and his nickname was Wheels, and he was constantly insulting the cabs when he was driving them. It was like, and so, you know, he had to get fired. Then there was the guy that showed up that didn't have a driver's license. So there's these conversations that are happening on the walkie. It's like, hey, Evan, I picked up that guy at the GO station. He doesn't have a driver's license. I don't think he can really drive with us. And it's like, well, can we take him to the ministry and you know, maybe, you know, he can get his license? And it's like, and I'm like, why are we having this conversation? Get rid of the guy, you know? And then there was that on that show, there's a thing where, you know, you drive the trucks and we're jockeying cars. So we're moving all the trucks to some location, and then we got to go back and get our cars. I'm following one of the drivers. It's on DuPont Street. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. He's farther ahead of me. I see him get pulled over. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? I pull over as well. I got out of my car. The cops are like, whoa, what's going on? And I said, well, what do you mean what's going on? He's my coworker. He's like, well, he's in the country illegally, so he's being deported. What? I call the transportation coordinator. I'm like, okay, so Edney got deported. I had the tag. I guess I'll get the car. I'll get his car. I'll need to take a taxi to go get his car and bring it back, etc. Like, okay. So then I put the taxi receipts through petty cash, and they reject it. It was like a low budget show. And then the transportation coordinator was like, "What? Why'd you put a taxi receipt?" That's for the guy, your guy that got deported. I'm not paying for picking up the cars. Right? I
Go to
gotta
work.
say, after all this time, I'm more interested in the stories. You know what I mean? Like the character people, they're what make it worthwhile. When we were on Bogus years ago, that Norman Jewison film, the camera operator was this very eclectic guy. He used to wear a cape, right? And there was a shot, he's doing a shot. He was just like, there was this interview with Whoopi Goldberg at one time, and they're like, "Oh, what's it like being with all these people?" And you're making, and then he goes, "Well," she goes, "The crew are more interesting." The camera whips over, and there's the camera operator standing on a hill, and his like cape is like blowing. It was like, and then we were doing a shot, and something goes wrong, and you hear Norman's voice, and Norman's voice, he wasn't a young man even then. He's like, "What happened there, Carrie? You get tangled up in your fucking cape." Never. I had an operator with a fucking cape before.
It's
Anyway,
true.
those are the people that make life interesting, right?
So you mentioned same transport coordinator. So you're a production assistant on Dance Me Outside, directed by Bruce. Now you've kind of been weaving in and out Norman Jewison, Bruce McDonald. Like, what are you taking from being around these? They were huge stars at the time. Even now they're like Canadian folklore, right? Or legends.
Well,
So
Norman, there was no, like, Norman was so smart, right? And he'd done it all already, right? And he had been nominated for Oscars. He'd made groundbreaking films. Sidney Poitier, when he smacked the white guy, you know, in the heat of the night, that was something that hadn't been done like that before. Fiddler on the Roof, Jesus Christ Superstar. The stories were endless and they were amazing. So, Norman, his sense of story, right, was amazing. Bruce was just lovely to be around, and you wanted to work hard for him. You wanted to help him achieve what he was going after, right? And he was just, he had that kind of rock and roll aesthetic. He was doing his own thing, which I think as a filmmaker, your own voice, that is something we all strive for, right? And Bruce was someone that had that.
So because someone who's like a rock and roll mentality, I don't feel is going to break through now, kind of thing.
Well,
Someone doing their own thing. Like, it seems like everyone's trying to do their own thing.
yeah, fair enough. But at that point, Bruce, that was his third or fourth feature. He'd already done Roadkill. He'd already done Highway 61, and he'd done short films. I think a lot of people, it's harder now. It's like that band, when you're musicians in the band in the first album, right? You have your whole career to do your first album, and then there's the follow-up. But I think people talk about phones. Oh, now everyone can make a movie. Sure, that doesn't mean it's going to be any good, right? There's so much out there. Like, how do you get people to your particular thing, even if it's any good? Like, I don't know. That for me is the more challenging question, right? How do you get the eyeballs on your particular expression? It's when what you were saying earlier. It's like, you're going to make the thing and just see what happens, right? It's okay. Is it okay if no one sees it? If a film projects in the theater and no one sees it, is it any good? I made a short in 2019. I decided to go a different approach because I've been doing the festival thing, and it's years, right? And I decided I cast someone who had an Instagram following of about 400,000 people. It's probably more now. And so I cast her in the short and see, okay, can that translate into eyeballs, right? And I'm just going to put the film out on YouTube and see how that goes, right? And so we made this short film. It's a one-shot film, one continuous crane shot, pushing in on this person who's having this interior monologue. She's in a hospital bed. She's waiting for test results. And she wrote the script, right? And so I went that route, and I tried that. I think we're up to about 40,000 views on YouTube. That's not nothing, but it's not what I was after. I was after like 100,000, So is that a success? I don't know. I mean, I'm happy with the film. There are some things that I wish I would have done differently, you know?
I think that's every film, because as a developer, things are constantly developing. You know, it's just, but at some point you just got to make it.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to think of great things afterwards, of course. Oh, I could have connected that and connected this. Oh, it would have been so much better. Ah,
Yeah.
fuck you. You know, like you tried. You actually went out there and made it. That's, you know.
That's why people making their indie films, I still do the occasional indie feature. Like I'll cut my rate and do whatever because I know how hard it is, and I can bring a lot to the table in terms of production experience. And even though I have directed, and people say, you know, I have worked with inexperienced directors, a lot of first-time directors, and people say, "Oh, you directed the film." No, I did not. That person, these were this person's ideas. I helped push them forward. We had a lot of conversations, right? I helped, and some people aren't able to raise their voice. I can silence a room if I have to. Like I'm naturally an introvert, but you know, being an AD, and I've done it before. I've been at public gatherings. Someone needed to speak. You need me to make everyone be quiet. I just bust out the voice, right? And so a director may have some good ideas. They may even be good at communicating them, but they're not able to raise their voice. Well, does that mean they didn't direct it? Well, of course not, right? They gave me instructions and I broadcast them for them, right?
Why is it, seems like you like to take on heavy projects, you know, the Greek Jews in Auschwitz, the lady getting test results one shot, like these are pretty deep. You know,
Well,
my last film was called Killer Door. It was, you know, absolutely stupid, you
right.
know? But you're taking, which is, I think it's a compliment because those are hard things to do. Even just as hard as I think maybe comedy is to do, but making like a serious, like I tried to make an indie crime flick when I was 25 and everything seemed so cool and we had the right wardrobe and everything. But then once I put it on and watched it, I was like, but I'm 25. These guys got to be like, I miss you know, it was the first thing I ever did, but I'm like, these guys got to be like 40 or 50, you know?
Casting, scripting, honestly, yeah. Script and casting. Everything else, people are always talking about the look of a film, and that, to me, that is important. But if the audience doesn't identify, believe, want to follow that person, want to care about them or hate them or whatever, then you failed. And that is not indicative necessarily of how good it looks. There's a story I tell about, I can't remember the name of the movie. It's about the drummer, Miles Teller, and J.K. Simmons. J.K. Simmons won the Oscar for it.
Whiplash.
There's a scene in it. It's almost entirely a two-shot. J.K. Simmons is asking the kid about himself. Where are you from? Okay. The whole premise, and he goes, oh, you know, Charlie Parker didn't become Charlie Parker overnight. He didn't become Bird overnight, right? And he tells him the story. The whole movie, the premise of the movie is in that scene. Okay, and it's J.K. Simmons, and you know, he's kind of sinister. You're not sure what's going on. It's underexposed and a lot grainy, right? So cinematically, and the rest of the film isn't quite like that. And you think, okay, well, so on a technical level, there are issues with that. However, the scene is very powerful. I think it's the one that actually won him the Oscar, right? So that to me is an example of, you know, this kid is getting wrapped up in this web, right? Here's the guy spinning it. He's basically trying to say the music is everything, right? And what doesn't matter what you have to do to get to that point, but the music is everything, but it's underexposed and grainy. Who cares? Like it's so compelling, right?
Let me ask you one thing about your casting. When you send somebody the lines that you want to read, that little paragraph or scene or whatever it is, do you pick? What I do is I essentially pick the most emotional moment, the hardest moment in the script that's going to be able to pull off, because if they can pull that off, the rest of it should be easy, smooth sailing kind of thing. And if they can show me something in the casting for that hardest moment, someone who kind of gets it that far away, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Do you do something similar?
I do, yeah. You want to see what they can do, but I also try not to give too much information off the top because I want to see what they're going to give me. I like being surprised. All right. When I did I Left Romania, you know, I needed it was a massive ensemble cast, and I needed a lot of people to play these Greek Jews, right? And we decided to go non-union because I couldn't use the tip program, like the actual low budget program, because I had Olympia Dukakis in it who's SAG, right? And I ain't giving her up. Like, let's not be ridiculous, right? Like, so that doesn't work with the tip program, right? And any other version of the Actura thing would have been too expensive. You know, we didn't have the money for it. So I used the casting agent, Buddy Brennan, who's excellent. Now, the first group that starts coming in, you know, these guys are showing up. You're like, okay, I've made a horrible mistake and we're screwed because this is just not going to work, right? But then some amazing people started showing up, and you started having that problem. And this is one of the horrible things about casting. There comes a point like, well, this guy looks like this guy. Well, this guy looks amazing, but he doesn't look Greek. It's like, well, we buy that he's Greek. Like, he gave this amazing performance, you know, and all of a sudden you're reducing people to their aesthetics, which is unfortunate, right? Or
we can't have two brown-haired guys in their 30s.
Yeah, we are, you know, the lead's blonde, so we can't have another blonde upstaging them. I think too much is given to that sometimes, right?
Oh, yeah, you worked with Norman Jewison, Joe Dante, Peter Bogdanovich. Peter Bogdanovich always wears the, what do you call it, kind of scarf there. Mascot. And, you know, he directed some things in The Sopranos, which I love, and he also played the therapist in The Sopranos. Anything interesting being around them?
So Norman produced this series of short films, which he directed one of them. And Alan Arkin was in that one.
I love Alan Arkin.
Oh, he was amazing. I did my Alan Arkin impression for Alan Arkin. He was not happy. So there's a driver that I worked with before, and he talked about working with Alan Arkin and on a film called Indian Summer, or it was originally called Tamaqua. It was about a bunch of kids who go, or a bunch of grown-ups who go back to their school, their.
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that. Actually, the cover looks pretty good. And you know what? Canada needs to make a little movie like that now that's a bit more, I didn't see it, but that's a bit more heartfelt and not as, I don't know what they're doing now. But I was like, you know what? I would watch something like this right now.
Yeah. I liked it.
Almost like the Big Chill, but it's got to be that kind of big chilly vibe. You can't get to, still got to be a little bit of a drama and things going on.
But also, we have great comedians, and comedians are usually good at doing drama. They can do comedy, and they can also do drama, a lot of them. So, you know, why we're not making those, I don't know, because we have the writers for it, right?
One interesting thing, I worked with Scott Thompson on What Would Sal Do, and we were smoking a J in Sudbury behind the hotel, me and him and someone else, and he was saying, he was kind of complaining. I was like, you're so right. You're so right. He was like, yeah, I'm just not getting the roles or something anymore. And it's like, he said, for some reason in Canada, people forget that you have this like resume. Like, he worked on such amazing shows with the top-notch people, and he was able to bring it there. Don't you think this guy could still do stuff now?
Yeah.
You know? And he said he just wasn't getting the roles. And I was like, yeah, this is
we have no
strange.
We're so spread apart. We don't have like a star system, right? It's not. You know.
That's what we're missing, a star system.
Well, yeah. I mean, you look at the UK, like they're, you know, the way they kind of do it, you know, but they're like, I wouldn't want to be like the Americans, right? Because it's all about the star system, right? Which doesn't necessarily make a good movie. You just have people wanting to know a lot about these famous people, you know.
That's an interesting concept. I'm going to think more about that. I never thought about that, the star system, and how Canada could work on something like that. Because technically, if you become a star in Canada, you just become a star in the States and essentially you just move there. It happens with, you know, Ryan Gosling or Ryan Reynolds or Tatiana Maslany, or that's the trajectory.
I worked with Tatiana Maslany twice. Once when she was about 12 on a TV series. It was one of my first AD gigs, like 20 years ago, a TV series called 2030 CE. We shot that in Winnipeg. I used to go back to Winnipeg to work as an AD a lot. And then I did a TV movie with her based on a series of novels about a poor Welsh girl in Toronto. Um, so it was interesting to see her as a little kid, and then then she was 16, and now she is who she. Isn't she going to be like a Marvel superhero? Isn't she up for one of those now?
I'm sure she is. She's already done superstardom status. She could
Just
do anything she wants right now.
just the loveliest person, right? She's from Saskatchewan. People from the West are the best, man. Yeah.
And I think the same thing about Michaela, who we worked with on Endlings and more so on Dino Dana. But she's such a pro now that I'm just like, you know what? She's just going to be a total pro. Like,
Yeah,
so
someone like that is not, I don't think, going to turn into a horrible human being, right? So the kid, great parents, just so well grounded, right? I mean, we'd be shooting with her. It's like, we'd be done a scene. She's like, okay, can I go to school now? Yes, you can go to school.
Men with Gun, Carrie Scoglin. Now she's directing big Marvel things now. We just talked about that. So, and HBO things. And did you take anything?
I didn't spend a lot of time in as a third AD. I moved up to second quite quickly. But so I did that film. So John Lequier was the original director of that film. It was Donal Logue, Callum Keith Rennie, and Greg Sporletter. And it was, this interesting kind of indie film, crime thriller. And the producer, Peter Simpson of North Star, right? He did a lot of TNA movies. And he kept telling John Lequier he wanted more TNA. And John Lequier finally told him to go fuck himself. And so Simpson fired him. And then Kari Skoglund came in. Ended up reshooting some stuff that didn't need to be reshot. But Kari Skoglund, I worked with her a couple times. She's very, very driven. And, is now doing like, some of the bigger things you're going to see, right?
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because I worked on a show season 1 and season 2. Just as a location manager, you hear things sometimes because you're driving with everyone early on and stuff like that. And this show wanted more TNA, and sure enough, season 2, baby, loaded with TNA, and that was from up top, from network. So that's marketing at its finest right now.
So Paul Sorvino was in that movie, and he was a very good actor in the sense that he only has one note, but it's a very good note. You believe whatever he's saying, right? But he was constantly holding court with his guys, and trying to give them instructions and lessons. And he was like on the last day, and he's like, guys, and you gotta find the lens. You gotta learn how to find the lens. And there's this one actor, Michael, I can't remember Michael's last name. Michael says to him, yeah, well, it's kind of hard to find the lens when you're standing in front of it all the time, you fat bastard. First AD, roll sound. They do the thing, and then Michael's gone, right? And years later, I'm a second AD, right? Like 5 years later, Michael is an actor, a day player on the thing, and I tell the story. He goes, oh, it gets better. He goes, I was a day player on a movie about Joe Torre, the baseball player, and their manager, and Sorvino's the manager. And I'm a baseball player. I got like one scene, and I'm shooting after lunch. I'm there before lunch. The producers are walking by. They introduce me to Paul Sorvino. Hey, Paul, this is Michael. He's going to be working with you this afternoon. Oh, okay. Hey, you look familiar. I like, yeah, I get that all the time. It's like, okay. Sorvino sits down. He goes, Sorvino walks past, going to the dessert cart. He's like, you know what? I never forget a face. I really feel, oh yeah, no, I get that all the time. It's like, he goes, Sorvino, second time he's going to the dessert cart. He's like, honestly, I know you. Where is it, man? He goes, fat bastard. Sorvino gets this look on his face. He gets all red, stomps away. Mikey goes back to his trailer. He goes about 20 minutes later, there's a knock. He goes, lunch is over. He goes, producer's like, okay, Sorvino's not going to come to set unless we fire you. So I'm sorry. And, Michael still would have got paid for the day. You can't just fire someone like that, but whatever.
Yeah.
And so I'm telling this story, both parts, to a mutual friend of like a guy who knows Michael, was friends with him. He goes, oh, it gets better. He goes, years later, Michael's in LA and he's driving, and someone steps out and like slams their hands on the hood of the car, and it's Paul Sorvino. Michael's driving.
You fat bastard.
Exactly. Things come in threes.
Let me ask you about the Beaverton. 13 episodes, first AD. Now, is that fun, set, light, you know, jokey, reasonable days in studio, that kind of thing? Like, is it a lot of fun doing that?
So there are two aspects of that. There was the sketch stuff on location, and then there was working as the floor director when you're shooting the anchors in front of an audience. So I've worked as a floor director twice. That has its own kind of energy, you know, because it's multi-camera, right? It's being switched in a room somewhere. You know, floor director is essentially a glorified third AD because you have a headset on, you're taking instructions from the director who's in the room, you know, switching all the cameras. But then you're going and interacting with the actors on behalf of the. So I did that on the Ron James show, the live in front of an audience stuff. It was fantastic because there's an energy to it that's amazing. So the you know, the Beaverton is a Canadian show. So the thing about Canadian shows is that they have a finite amount of money, right? There's never going to be a situation where the, you know, CBC or whatever is going to give you more money. That's your budget, right?
Mm-hmm.
They allow for breakage on some small item, but it's not like, you know, a Netflix show I've worked on where they go, okay, we'll give you another half day per episode, or we'll give you, that's not going to happen with a Canadian show. The amount of money you have is the amount of money you have. And so the Beaverton, we didn't do long days. There were a couple because, you know, sometimes it gets away from you. There's issues, you know, and the production in theory is going to have some money for overtime. But the thing about comedy's comedy's harder than drama by far, right? I find we had good writing, we had good cast, and then comedy, it's in the editing room as well. You need a lot of time in the editing room to really dig it out, right?
Yeah. Where's the cut? Where's the timing on this joke? Where does it land? And when do I cut away all this?
So I've had a couple. My journey in terms of there used to be a journey of first AD to director. That's pretty much gone now, right? Also, as a middle-aged white guy, that's really not going to happen. But you know what? I understand that, and I'm okay with it. So I did the first season of the Beaverton, and I fought hard to. I do well on those sort of mid-budget, lower-budget shows because I can squeeze a lot of production value out of a little, right? Because once again, image theory, reducing things down to, you know, we don't need that, we don't need this. You know, can we do this? You know, I worked well with that director, Henry Sawyer Foner. I worked well with the showrunners. You know, there was a sketch they were going to cut at one point, and it was about, you know, it was called Anne Green Gables 5. You know, Anne of Green Gables 5, Anne versus Hitler. And they were going to cut it. And I said, if you cut that sketch, I'm quitting, right? Because it was so funny. It was Anne of Green Gables. You know, it was like a movie trailer. And it's like Anne steps up. She's got blood on her face. She picks up her hat and she puts up her fist. She goes, let's dance, Hitler. And, you know, cut to, there's like Hitler standing there. And then it's cut to the backstage. They're in like the director's chairs like you have in the background there. You know, Hitler's eating like a lox on a bagel. She's like, I think if Anne would have been around during World War II, she would have fought Hitler. And there was a bit more, but it was just so good. I'm like, you're not cutting that sketch, right?
Yeah. You got to kind of stick with the Dave Chappelle mentality or theory. He was breaking boundaries with his sketch comedy show, doing basically what some people would think would be the most terrible stuff, but it was so funny. There's just no denying it. And I think even with, you know, Jojo Rabbit, as long as it's done right and as long as it's funny, I don't think people care. As long as it's funny, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm a big Dave Chappelle fan. It's interesting, you know, but his approach, because for him, there's just such veritas there. But even now, him, you know, he's constantly getting into trouble. Like people were. There's no end of list of people that are gonna get offended by whatever you do. I mean, Jojo Rabbit, people started, you know, throwing some shade to that. You know, it turns out the director himself is Jewish, right? Oh, okay. Well, then never mind. It's like, oh, really? Yeah. I thought that was a good. That guy's so talented, the New Zealander. So I did the first season of the Beaverton. The production manager became the line producer in the second season. I got along really well with one of the producers. They talked to me about would I be interested in directing half the season 2. Yeah, yes, I would. But then the network said, no, we want someone else. So I know it was one of those moments, like if that would have happened, it's like, like I interviewed for This Hour's 22 Minutes at one point. I was ADing on a show and I had to go leave. It was stupid because I just should have taken the day off. I ended up going to the wrong office. So when I finally showed up for my interview, I was all flustered and like I sat down and the people I were interviewing me, and one of like, would you like a glass of water? Like they're just they were fearful. So I blew the interview, right? I got that one on the basis of the Ron James show, right? Which I had AD'd, I had directed, and I had floor directed on. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the Ron James show a lot.
Doing half a season on a show like the Beaverton seems like it would be a lot of fun, directing that comedy and having a good time with it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So 45 episodes of The Next Step. 45 episodes is a lot. And now this is a show about dancing. It's got a complicated wardrobe, choreographed dance show. Like this sounds like it just must be chaos and absolute insanity.
It is and it isn't. So the original guy who created that show, Frank Van Keeken, there's a few people that I've encountered that are like him. He was a real force to be reckoned with because he knew what his audience was. He knew his audience was like kids of a certain age, like, single digit age to early teens. So when it came to wardrobe continuity and stuff like that, he wasn't worried. And when there was stuff that, we get all wound up about technically, he's like, don't worry about it. And because he knew that the kids that were watching it weren't going to care about that. And the way that show would work, the amount of pages we would do in a day, like when I first started on that show, I was like, we're really going to do this many scenes in one day? And like, yeah, I'm like, okay, all right. And then we did it. And so the way Frank would work is he would have a microphone. We would just roll the cameras, right? And he was shot like a multicam sitcom, right? There was one camera that would be on a dolly, the other cameras would be on PEDs. And, we would block the scene first. And then he would talk the kids into it. And he would do a lot of pickups. Okay, now say it again, say it again. And he was really good at directing performance. And, our usual process, block, light, rehearse, shoot. Another person who shoots like that? J.J. Johnson, right? Like he rolls the camera and just talks to people through it. In 45 minutes, you're done the scene. It drives everybody crazy because they can't do what they think they're supposed to be doing, but it's another approach. And for those projects, it works quite well, right?
Yeah, I love hearing that. Say it again. Just twist the line a little bit this way. Like in the moment, leave the camera running. Yeah, just like this. Yeah.
I had there's a guy who I came up through the ranks with and I lost contact with, and now he directs on like Star Trek and stuff like that. And he'll micromanage actors in some of those moments, and the actors don't like it, right? Can't just cut and come talk to me, or we can just roll the camera and just stay in the moment. And some people, they won't do it. However, his episodes apparently turn out really well because he gets these moments. But, some actors will say, I'm not a puppet. You can't stick your hand up my ass. And like, it depends. They've got to be okay with the approach. Two of the shows we just talked about were kids shows. The kids don't know any better. They don't care. We get a new director on. It's like, well, what about, like, the kids don't care. The kids are waiting for you to tell them what to do. They're not like, grown-up actors are going to show up and they've got all these ideas that they want to in terms of the thing. The kids are just waiting to be told what to do, right?
So directing 2 episodes of The Next Step, you were already working on it, and they said, why don't you know what you're doing, why don't you just do 2 episodes kind of thing?
Yeah, and that was my first DGC directing job. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, unfortunately, that was also the last DGC one. I did some second unit on Wayne.
I just wanted to ask you about that. That was Next Up, actually. I just finished watching it on Amazon Prime.
Pretty good, eh?
And I said, you know what, this is the best Canadian content I've seen in a while. While, for sure.
I don't know.
And the thing I loved about it most was the characters were so ruthless in the sense that they were assholes, but they never shied away from it. They never pulled back. So if they said an asshole statement, they just dug in even further with the next statement and were even more of an asshole.
That show was so hard to make because it was originally aired on Google. right? And Google Red, Google Play, whatever the hell they were calling themselves at that time. And, you know, Google's like, oh, we're going to get into scripted content. And Sean Simmons, the creator, original voice, you know, the concept of the show is it's John Hughes meets John Wick, right? So that kind of coming of age, but with really kick-ass violence. And
Yeah.
but the thing is, they only, you know, ADs get a bad rap. It's like, oh, you know, there's too much to do on this day. We don't decide how many days per episode. That's not the way it works. We get handy to go, you got 7 days. We can say it's not enough, but at the end of the day, the producers and the production company decides how many days, right? So you have a choice. You can either quit or move on, right? But ADs often get blamed. Oh, there's too much to do on this day. It's like, okay, all right, thanks. Anyway, this is what we're doing. And so anyway, on that show, they had only allowed 5 days per episode. And even though it's a half-hour show, it was so dense, right? We needed way more days. Anyway, so it you know, goes on Google. They don't really promote it particularly well, which of course, you know, the biggest advertising platform in the world. Anyway, so now it's on Amazon Prime, and I was just texting with the showrunner yesterday, creator, and they're hoping they're going to get a second season.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where it goes. I think the thing I like about it most is the characters and the acting. It's done like an HBO show.
Yep.
Good music placement. You know, it's got a lot going for it. The characters are what, 16-year-old kids in the show, but they talk like they're 30 or 40-year-old New Jersey or New Yorkers or whatever it is. New Jersey?
Outside
Boston?
of
Boston.
Brockton,
Yeah.
Brockton, Mass. The DP was my former schoolmate and ex-roommate, Gregor Hagee. That was fun, working with Gregor. Lovely human being. Good DP.
I hope whatever happens, I hope that show gets picked up and keeps going, just for the sake that it's been really, I would say, the most refreshing thing I've seen come out of Canada.
Original voice, and like I give it my all no matter what I'm working on, right? Because that's the job. And you always find something to love about it, whether it's the people you're working with, whether it's the story, whether it's, and maybe the thing for a variety of reasons doesn't turn out to be something amazing, but there's always something compelling about every project, right? And Wayne was really, really hard to make. Lot of long hours on that one, but the product was amazing.
Yeah, I thought they really utilized Hamilton well, the industrial rundown.
Yes, it's funny because when I started the show, they're like, oh yeah, we are. They shot the pilot in Hamilton, but we are not going to Hamilton. I'm like, this show needs Hamilton. You need that grunge. And not that all of Hamilton's grungy, but Hamilton, and some of that grunge in Hamilton is starting to disappear as well as it gets gentrified, right? But you need that. And the thing about Toronto is like, okay, you're going to get 3 buildings of it, but then there's no reverse, and et cetera, right? And you're going to have to dress it. Whereas in Hamilton, it's just there. Right?
And a very simple show too, in the sense that really they're just after a hot shit Trans Am. Yep. You know, that's really what it boils down to. So I really like that.
But at the core of it, it's about a, you know, it's a love story. It's a road movie, and it's about a guy trying to find his sense of self, right? And that
all of that.
All of it. That actor Mark, oh, so good. Those 2 actors, just they were. There's some shows I'll work on, and they'll say, "Is the schedule doable?" I go, if the actors show up to work, the schedule is doable. If the actors show up, and I don't, it's gonna sound like I'm dumping on actors, but some Hollywood guys, like, let me know when you're ready, right? And you know, they'll go back to their trailer, right? And or they're always got to be on the phone about something, and they're texting or this or that or whatever. It's like, okay, this is where the work is, right? You know, like try and kick Mark off set.
I saw you produced. Is it Avi's? Was it his directorial debut, Red Balloon?
The short, yeah. I once again I gave him some money, you know,
Gotcha.
So I wasn't really involved. But Avi and I, once again, Avi has been making indie features. He's been fighting the good fight. He started a distribution company. He's had his, you know, foot in that pond of indie films, trying to get Canadian films made. So he's going to go make his own film. I'm going to help him. You know how hard it is, right? Like, here, take some money, go.
Yeah.
Don't
I
tell
think
him.
he's
Hopefully
actually,
not
that might
like
go
you.
back to what he might be one of the last kind of indie rock stars, because what he is doing is very noble,
Yeah.
and he's going for that Canadian content. And I think to an extent he is probably the, what we were saying earlier, like
And
the,
he gets no love from Telefilm. Another film called Moon Point, this little indie film, lovely little road film. I loved it. I loved it. And Sean Cisterna directed that. Another kind of indie filmmaker, kind of doing his own thing. Um, you know, I, the Abby, like Telefilm is a clique, right? I've tried multiple times to get money from Telefilm. Most recently, I was attached to a Paul Haggis film, right? So Paul Haggis, Academy Award winner for Crash, Academy Award winner for the screenplay for $1 Million Baby. So we claim him as Canadian, but he's you know he lives in the States, right, and has been there for a long time, and but and an amazing screenwriter. And so there's a actor producer I know who met Paul. They struck up a friendship, right? And that actor producer is trying to get into the bigger game. He he helped finance an indie film at one point, and so he got an exec producer credit for that. But he's looking to be more in control of something, right? He met Paul. Paul's going through a rough patch. Paul has got snared up in the whole Me Too thing, right? He's got some accusers that are after him. Now, Paul is saying that it's because of the sort of takedown he did on Scientology, right? That these people are, were put up to this. And it's still making its way through the courts because there were no criminal charges pressed. There was an investigation, no criminal charges were laid, but there's a civil case that's kind of winding its way. So Hollywood has turned its back on Paul, right? So this other Canadian producer, he goes, will you come in with me? Okay, great. I get my business partner. We start talking to Paul. Okay. I've tried to raise money for movies. When I say that it's Paul Haggis, it's this, and these are the Hollywood actors that we're going out to for the script. Oh, all of a sudden I can raise millions of dollars. So I've got some soft, commitments of millions of dollars. And let's go to Telefilm now and talk to Telefilm. So we have a couple meetings. And then at one point, Paul calls Telefilm himself. He calls Stephanie Azam, who then point blank tells him that you should get different producers. So then he takes up with, she gives him a list of some other Canadian producers that have envelopes of Telefilm, right? Now, at this point, we didn't have the option. We've all just been proceeding in good faith. These are things you're not supposed to do, but we did, right? I tried to lock up the option like last fall. In any event, Paul was hooked up with Neve Fishman now. But I don't think, the COVID thing happened, and I don't think the film's getting made right now. So who knows? I have a feature that it's all set 90% in one house. It's kind of made to be shot during these times, like I think I can do it with less than 10 people in a house. 4 of those would be actors, right? And we're trying to raise money for that. And we have some leads, and we'll see. This one feature, horror genre. For me, I always need films that have levels. So we're not developing it. We're raising money for a film called Cannibal Rain. It's about a South Asian family that's trapped in a house, and there's a zombie apocalypse outside. And if this rain touches you, it turns into a bloodthirsty cannibal. But they also can't get along with each other. It's like, will the rain kill them before they kill each other, right? And
reminds me of a film called Chubby Rain from Bowfinger.
it's funny you should say that, because I sent the script to someone years ago. One of my English compatriots from my online master's degree, and he said, "Well, and he was totally serious. Aren't you worried people are going to confuse it with Chubby Rain?" I'm like, "No, I think it's okay."
Chubby Rain is ridiculous.
I think it's too close to that. I'm like, no, it's okay. It's okay. And I have, I started out wanting to write. I used to write when I was in like elementary school, And I was published a couple times when I was in university. I even got paid once, right? But I'm trying to, taking the downtime, make use of it. I'm finishing some scripts, right? While we're trying to get Cannibal Rain made. It's tough though, like to go into production right now. Like we're locking everything down again. So I think it'll be 2021.
Well, man, thank you very much for coming on. This was a blast catching up, some good stories and everything. I want to do one thing before we go. It's a little something I included here called The Gauntlet.
Okay.
David, what shape is the sky?
Blue.
Where does the time go?
Into the void.
Why is a boxing ring square?
The squared circle is the answer to all of life's problems. You got to fight it out.
Which apocalyptic dystopia is most possible, and is that the one you would thrive in? So we're talking zombies, cannibals, Mad Max, Hunger Games, Black Mirror.
I was, we're living in Black Mirror for sure, but I think I was definitely built for the zombie apocalypse. I'm a marathon runner, so I'm built for distance.
Gotcha. So you wouldn't be one of the zombies, you'd be running away from the zombies.
Yes.
A survivor.
Yes.
Why are we here?
I don't know that one. I'm still working on that one. I mean, because that to me, art, Nietzsche said that the act of creation is divine, right? Brings you closer to your maker, because these things that we make, they did not exist before that moment. And that's what I love about it, the beauty. And for me, there is only one question. Why? Why are we here? Why anything? Right? And that is part of the thing that I imbue with all that I do, to try and answer that question. And I guess life's journey is to try and answer that question, but it's the journey to answer the question, and you never do get the answer, I don't think.
What does the world need most?
Well, it's cliche, but I think it definitely needs more love and understanding. Right? Listening. It needs more listening. Less talking, more listening.
Well, that's a good way to wrap it up right now. So thank you for being here, man. Just stay on here after I sign off. And David Antoniuk, everyone, filmmaker, and lots of fun to talk to, and hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks very much.
Nice seeing you.